The rapid crack of a gunshot echoed through the stagecoach as it rumbled to a halt, sending Eleanor Hayes tumbling forward against her luggage. Outside, the driver's voice bellowed something about a broken wheel, but Eleanor barely heard him over the thundering of her own heart. This wasn't how she'd imagined arriving in Oroville, California, her future home, where a husband she'd never met awaited her arrival. The husband whose advertisement she'd answered 3 months ago, whose contract she'd signed without fully understanding its contents. It was April of 1875, and the California gold rush had long since faded into legend, but the town of Oroville still clung to its mining roots. Prospectors had been replaced by farmers, merchants, and ranchers, one of whom would soon become Eleanor's husband. At 22, with no family left in Boston after the fever took them, she'd had little choice but to answer the advertisement. Seeking respectable woman of childbearing age for marriage. Passage paid. Reply immediately. Eleanor straightened her bonnet and smoothed her travel-worn dress as the driver helped her down from the coach. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, nothing like the gentle springs of Massachusetts. Clutching her single valise, all that remained of her former life, she stood at the edge of Main Street and tried to mask her apprehension. "Miss Hayes," a gravelly voice called. She turned to see an elderly man with spectacles perched on his nose. "I'm Mr. Perkins, the postmaster. Mr. Keller asked me to fetch you. He's still out at his ranch." "Mr. Keller," Eleanor's voice quavered slightly. "Lucas Keller." "You're intended." Mr. Perkins raised a bushy eyebrow. "He couldn't get away from the ranch today. Spring calving season and all that. I'm to take you to Mrs. Wilson's boarding house for the night. He'll come for you tomorrow." The disappointment was crushing. After traveling for weeks, Eleanor had expected her fiancé to at least meet her upon arrival. "I see," she said, forcing a smile. "That's very kind of you, Mr. Perkins." The boarding house was a 2-story building with a fresh coat of white paint and blue shutters. Mrs. Wilson, a plump woman with kind eyes, welcomed Eleanor warmly. "You must be exhausted, dear. Come in, come in. I've got a room ready and supper's almost on the table." That night, lying in an unfamiliar bed, Eleanor pulled out the contract she'd signed. The words swam before her eyes, meaningless symbols she couldn't decipher. She'd been too proud to admit her illiteracy to the lawyer who'd handled the transaction, nodding along as if she understood perfectly. Her late father had always meant to teach her to read, but his work at the textile mill consumed his days, and then the fever took him too quickly. Now, as she traced her fingers over her own signature, the only writing she knew how to produce, Eleanor wondered what she'd truly agreed to. Morning came too soon. Eleanor had barely finished a breakfast of corn muffins and coffee when Mrs. Wilson announced, "He's here." Lucas Keller was nothing like she'd imagined. Tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of the summer sky, he removed his hat as he entered, revealing sandy brown hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. He couldn't have been more than 30. "Miss Hayes," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "Welcome to Oroville. I hope your journey wasn't too tiresome." Eleanor found herself tongue-tied. "It was. Long, Mr. Keller," he nodded, taking in her appearance with an appraising glance that made her cheeks warm. "The wagon's outside. If you're ready, we can head to the ranch now." The ride out of town was awkward. Lucas Keller was not a talkative man, and Eleanor's attempts at conversation fell flat. She learned that his ranch was about 5 miles outside town, that he raised cattle primarily, and that he'd been in California for 7 years, having come west after the war. "You fought in the war?" she asked, hoping to draw him out. His hands tightened on the reins. "Yes." "Which side?" It was a bold question, but she needed to know. "Union." The single word seemed to close the subject. The ranch came into view as they crested a small rise, a modest homestead with a main house, barn, and several outbuildings. A corral held a few horses, and in the distance, cattle grazed on rolling pasture-land. "It's not much," Lucas said, "but it's mine, paid for free and clear." "It's lovely," Eleanor replied truthfully. After the cramped tenement apartment she'd shared with her parents in Boston, the open space was breathtaking. As Lucas helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary. Eleanor felt a strange flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with fear. "Come inside," he said. "You should see where you'll be living." The house was simple but well built, with 3 rooms, a kitchen and living area combined, Lucas's bedroom, and a smaller room that had clearly been prepared for her. Eleanor noticed a new quilt on the bed and a small vase of wildflowers on the dresser. "Mrs. Wilson helped with the woman things," Lucas explained, seeming almost embarrassed. "I wasn't sure what you'd need." "It's perfect," Eleanor said, touched by the gesture. "We'll be married on Saturday," Lucas continued, his tone businesslike. "I've arranged it with Reverend Thompson. That gives you 3 days to settle in and prepare." Eleanor's heart raced. "So soon?" Lucas's expression darkened slightly. "That's what the contract stipulates. We're to be married within a week of your arrival." The contract. Eleanor swallowed hard. "Of course." That evening, as Eleanor prepared a simple supper of salt pork and beans, she tried to make sense of her situation. Lucas Keller seemed decent enough, not particularly warm, but not cruel either. The ranch was comfortable, and life here would certainly be better than the desperate poverty she'd faced in Boston. Yet something about the businesslike way he approached their impending marriage troubled her. After supper, Lucas cleared his throat. "I have some paperwork to attend to," he said, pulling several documents from a drawer. "Ranch ledgers and such." Eleanor nodded, watching as he spread papers across the table and began examining them. She gathered the dishes and took them to the wash basin, trying not to stare as Lucas's finger moved across the pages, his lips occasionally forming silent words as he reading. Something she'd never learned to do. Would he discover her secret? Would he send her back east if he knew? "Is something wrong?" Lucas asked, catching her staring. Eleanor jumped. "No, I was just wondering if you'd like coffee." "That would be fine." As she busied herself with the coffee pot, Eleanor noticed Lucas had set aside a familiar paper, her contract. Her stomach clenched. Had he seen something in it that concerned him? Was there something she should know? The next morning, Eleanor woke to find Lucas already gone from the house. A note sat on the kitchen table. She picked it up, turning it over in her hands, wishing desperately she could decipher its meaning. Was it instructions? Expectations for the day? There was no way to know. She set about exploring the house more thoroughly, discovering a small vegetable garden out back that needed weeding and a henhouse with a dozen chickens. By midday, she'd collected eggs, weeded the garden, and swept the house from top to bottom. Still, Lucas hadn't returned. Late afternoon brought the sound of hoofbeats. Eleanor hurried to the door, relieved to see Lucas dismounting from his horse. His expression was grim. "Is everything all right?" she asked. "Fine," he replied shortly. "Just problems with the north fence line, nothing for you to worry about." But as the day progressed, Eleanor sensed something was bothering him. He was distracted during supper, barely touching the rabbit stew she'd prepared. "Lucas," she ventured, using his given name for the first time, "if there's something troubling you." His blue eyes met hers. "It's nothing, I'm just tired." But his gaze drifted to the contract, which still lay on the side table. That night, Eleanor lay awake, anxiety gnawing at her. Tomorrow was her last day before the wedding. If there was something in that contract she needed to know, it had to be now. Making a decision, She slipped from her bed and padded silently to the kitchen. Moonlight streamed through the window, illuminating the room enough for her to locate the contract. She was staring at it helplessly when a floorboard creaked behind her. "What are you doing?" Lucas's voice was low, suspicious. Eleanor whirled around, clutching the paper to her chest. I couldn't sleep. "So you decided to read the contract at midnight?" His eyes narrowed. "Or can't you read it at all?" The bluntness of the question left her speechless. Heat flooded her face as shame overtook her. You can't read, can you?" His voice softened slightly. Tears pricked at Eleanor's eyes. "No," she whispered. "I never learned." Lucas ran a hand through his hair, sighing heavily. "Why didn't you say something before signing it?" "Because I was desperate," the words burst from her. "My parents died, I was about to be evicted, and I had nowhere to go. The lawyer said it was a standard contract, and I believed him. What choice did I have?" Lucas was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable in the moonlight. Finally, he extended his hand. "Give me the contract." Eleanor handed it over, her hands trembling. "Sit down," he said, his voice gentler now. He lit a lamp and placed it on the table between them. "There are things in this contract you need to know." Fear clutched at Eleanor's heart. "Bad things." "That depends on your perspective." Lucas cleared his throat. "The contract stipulates that you will serve as my wife in all respects, including bearing children. It specifies that you will maintain the household, assist with ranch duties as needed, and receive an allowance of $10 monthly for personal expenses." Eleanor nodded slowly. None of this seemed unreasonable. "It also states," Lucas continued, his voice hardening, "that you relinquish all rights to property acquired during the marriage. Should you leave before 5 years have passed, you forfeit any claim to compensation or support." "I see," Eleanor murmured. "Is that unusual?" "It's not unheard of," Lucas admitted. "But there's more." His finger traced a paragraph near the bottom of the page. "This clause states that you agree to submit to correction at my discretion for any perceived failures in your wifely duties." Eleanor's blood ran cold. "Correction, physical punishment," Lucas clarified, his jaw tight. "And this final clause stipulates that should you prove barren after 2 years of marriage, I may dissolve the union without obligation." The room seemed to spin around Eleanor. "So I'm to be little more than a breeding slave, with no rights or protections." Lucas's eyes met hers, something unreadable in their depths. "This is not a contract I would have written." "But you knew what it contained," she accused. "You've had it all this time." "I received it only yesterday when I collected your trunk from the freight office. Your lawyer sent it ahead separately." Lucas's voice was tight. "I've been trying to decide what to do about it." "What to do?" Eleanor echoed, confusion mingling with her fear. Lucas stood abruptly, the contract crumpling in his fist. "This ends now." "What ends?" "This arrangement." Lucas paced the small kitchen. "I won't hold you to these terms. No decent man would." Relief flooded through Eleanor, followed quickly by panic. "But what will happen to me?" "I have nowhere to go, no money for passage back east, no family." "I'm not sending you away," Lucas interrupted. "Unless that's what you want." "What? What are you saying?" Lucas sat back down, his expression earnest. "I'm saying we tear up this contract and start fresh. If you wish to stay and become my wife, we draw up new terms, fair terms. Or if you prefer, you can remain here as my housekeeper until you decide what you want. I'll pay you a proper wage." Eleanor stared at him, searching for deceit in his face and finding none. "Why would you do this?" "Because I was raised better than this," Lucas said simply. "My mother would turn in her grave if she knew I'd taken a wife under such terms." A lump formed in Eleanor's throat. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll stay," Lucas replied, surprising her with the quiet intensity in his voice. "Not because you're trapped, but because you choose to." "And if I choose to be your wife," Eleanor whispered, "then we'll be married as equals, partners in this ranch and in life." The lamp flickered between them, casting dancing shadows across Lucas's face. In that moment, something shifted in Eleanor's perception of this taciturn rancher. "I'd like to stay," she said softly, "but I need time to decide about marriage." Lucas nodded, relief evident in his features. "Take all the time you need." He held the contract over the lamp's flame. The paper caught fire, curling and blackening until only ashes remained. "A fresh start," he said, brushing the ashes into his palm and tossing them out the open window into the night air. Eleanor slept better that night than she had in months. When morning came, she found Lucas already at work in the barn. She brought him coffee, watching as he repaired a broken harness with strong, capable hands. "I've been thinking," she said, handing him the steaming mug. Lucas looked up, his expression guarded. About staying here." "As your housekeeper for now," he nodded slowly, taking a sip of coffee. "That seems sensible, and," Eleanor hesitated, "I'd like to learn to read. Would you? Would you teach me?" Something like surprise followed by respect flashed across Lucas's face. "I would be honored to teach you, Eleanor. We can start this evening after supper." The next few weeks established a routine. During the day, Eleanor tended to the house and garden while Lucas worked with his cattle and horses. In the evenings, they sat at the kitchen table with books and slates, Lucas patiently guiding Eleanor through the basics of reading and writing. Eleanor proved a quick study. By June, she could recognize simple words and write her name properly. By July, she was reading simple sentences from the Bible, the only book Lucas owned besides a farming almanac. One evening, as they finished a reading lesson, Lucas said, "We should go into town tomorrow. You need more books and I need supplies." The trip to Oroville marked Eleanor's first return to town since her arrival. As they drove the wagon down Main Street, she was acutely aware of the curious glances from townsfolk. Word had spread that Lucas Keller had brought home a mail-order bride but hadn't married her. "Ignore them," Lucas murmured, sensing her discomfort. "What we do is our business, not theirs." At the general store, Lucas purchased the supplies they needed while Eleanor browsed the small selection of books. She selected a primer designed for children and, after hesitation, a slim volume of poetry. "Are you sure?" Lucas asked when she showed him her choices. "The poetry might be difficult." "I want something to aspire to," Eleanor replied firmly. Lucas smiled, a rare, full smile that transformed his face and made Eleanor's heart skip a beat. "Then we'll get both." As they left the store, a woman approached, elegantly dressed with golden hair arranged in an elaborate coiffure. "Lucas," she called, her voice melodic. "What a pleasant surprise." Lucas stiffened beside Eleanor. "Miss Cartwright, good afternoon." "Victoria, please," the woman corrected, her gaze sliding to Eleanor with undisguised curiosity. "And this must be your housekeeper, the one everyone's talking about." The emphasis she placed on housekeeper made Eleanor's cheeks burn. "This is Miss Eleanor Hayes," Lucas said stiffly. "Eleanor, this is Miss Victoria Cartwright. Her father owns the bank." "How quaint," Victoria said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Lucas' father was hoping you'd stop by. He has a business proposition for you." "Another time, perhaps," Lucas replied. "We need to be getting back to the ranch." Victoria placed a gloved hand on his arm. "Don't be a stranger. We miss seeing you at social gatherings." As they drove away, Eleanor couldn't help asking, "Is she a friend of yours?" Lucas's grip tightened on the reins. "Her father wants to buy my land, has for years, and Victoria thinks she wants to be a rancher's wife." "Oh," Eleanor didn't know what else to say. Victoria Cartwright was beautiful, well-bred, and clearly interested in Lucas. What chance did a former factory girl with no education have against someone like that? I'm not interested in Victoria Cartwright, Lucas said suddenly, as if reading her thoughts. Or her father's money. The simple declaration shouldn't have made Eleanor's heart sore, but it did. August brought scorching heat and drought. The creek that ran through Lucas's property slowed to a trickle, and the grass in the pastures turned brown. Eleanor watched Lucas grow increasingly worried as he rode out each day to check on his cattle and water sources. "How bad is it?" she asked one evening as he returned, dust-covered and exhausted. "Bad," he admitted, collapsing into a chair. "If we don't get rain soon, I'll have to sell some of the herd. I can't water them all with what's left in the creek." Eleanor brought him a cup of water, acutely aware of its preciousness. "Is there anything I can do?" Lucas looked up at her, fatigue etching lines around his eyes. "You're already doing it. Just being here helps." The simple admission touched her deeply. Over the months, their relationship had evolved from awkward strangers to something approaching friendship. Lucas was still reserved, but increasingly, Eleanor caught glimpses of the man beneath the taciturn exterior, a man with principles, intelligence, and surprising gentleness. 3 days later, disaster struck. Eleanor was hanging laundry when she smelled smoke. Looking toward the hills, she saw a plume of dark gray rising against the blue sky. Forest fire. She ran to the house just as Lucas came galloping in from the pasture. "Fire in the north woods," he shouted. "It's moving this way. We need to prepare." The next hours were a blur of activity. Lucas hitched the wagon and loaded it with essentials: food, clothing, important papers. Eleanor gathered her few precious possessions, including her books and the small locket containing a strand of her mother's hair. "If the wind shifts south, the fire could reach the house by nightfall," Lucas explained grimly. "I need to move the cattle to the south pasture and open the corral gates for the horses." "What can I do?" Eleanor asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Wet down the roof and the ground around the house. It might not help, but it's worth trying." As Lucas rode off toward the cattle, Eleanor set to work with buckets and the hand pump, soaking blankets and draping them over the roof edges, throwing water on the parched ground surrounding the house. The smoke grew thicker, stinging her eyes and making it difficult to breathe. By late afternoon, the sky had darkened ominously. Lucas returned, his face streaked with soot. "The cattle are safe for now, but the fire's coming faster than I expected. We need to go." "But the house is just a house," Lucas said firmly. "It can be rebuilt. You can't." Something in his voice made Eleanor's heart clench. He truly cared what happened to her. They were preparing to leave when the wind suddenly shifted, bringing a welcome coolness from the west. Lucas paused, looking toward the hills. "Wait," he said. "The wind's changing direction. The fire might turn east away from us." Through the night, they kept vigil. Lucas rode out periodically to check the fire's progress, returning each time with cautiously optimistic reports. By dawn, it was clear the danger had passed. The fire had indeed turned eastward, burning uninhabited forest rather than their ranch. As the sun rose, casting golden light across the smoke-hazed landscape, Eleanor found Lucas standing at the edge of the property, staring at the distant hills where wisps of smoke still rose. "We were lucky," he said as she approached. "Yes," she agreed. Then, without thinking, she reached for his hand. "I was so afraid we'd lose everything." Lucas's fingers tightened around hers. "Not everything," he said softly. "Not you." Their eyes met, and in that moment, Eleanor saw clearly what had been building between them for months. Not obligation, not convenience, but something deeper and truer. Lucas stepped closer, his free hand coming up to touch her cheek. "Eleanor," but whatever he meant to say was interrupted by the sound of approaching riders. They turned to see 3 men on horseback coming up the road, one of whom Eleanor recognized as Mr. Cartwright from the bank, with his daughter Victoria riding beside him. Lucas dropped her hand and stepped away, his expression closing off. "Keller," Cartwright called. "We saw the fire. Came to check if you needed assistance." "The fire turned east," Lucas replied stiffly. "We're fine." Victoria's gaze traveled from Lucas to Eleanor, noting their proximity with obvious disapproval. "How fortunate," she said coolly. "Indeed," Cartwright agreed. "Though this does highlight how vulnerable isolated properties can be. My offer still stands, Keller. Sell to me and you won't have to worry about fires or drought again." "Not interested," Lucas said flatly. Cartwright's friendly expression hardened. "You should reconsider." "I'm not the only one interested in this land. The railroad's looking to expand through these parts." "Is that a threat?" Lucas asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Just business," Cartwright replied smoothly. "Victoria, let's go. Mr. Keller clearly isn't in a negotiating mood today." As they rode away, Eleanor asked, "What did he mean about the railroad?" Lucas's jaw was tight. "The Southern Pacific wants to run a line through this valley. Cartwright's been buying up land, likely planning to sell it to them at a profit. And your ranch sits right where they want to build." Lucas kicked at a stone. "Cartwright's been after me to sell for years, but lately he's gotten more insistent." The implications were clear. "He's trying to force you out," Lucas nodded grimly. "There've been incidents, cattle found with my brand turning up in other herds. Water diverted from the creek upstream. You think he's behind it, can't prove it." Lucas sighed heavily. "But this land is mine. I worked for it, bled for it. I won't give it up without a fight." Eleanor placed a hand on his arm. "Then we'll fight together." Lucas looked down at her, surprise and something else, something warmer in his eyes. "We?" "Yes," she said firmly. "We." The moment was broken by distant thunder. They looked up to see dark clouds gathering on the horizon. "Rain," Lucas whispered, hope edging his voice. "Come on." He grabbed Eleanor's hand, and they ran toward the house just as the first heavy drops began to fall. Within minutes, it was pouring blessed, drenching rain that would quench the remaining fires and bring life back to the parched land. Standing on the porch, they watched the downpour, laughing with relief as thunder boomed overhead. Without warning, Lucas pulled Eleanor into his arms and kissed her a kiss born of joy and fear, and something that had been building between them for months. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Lucas said, "I've been wanting to do that for weeks." "Why didn't you?" Eleanor asked, her heart pounding. "Because I wanted you to choose me freely, not because you had nowhere else to go." His eyes searched hers. "Eleanor, I don't want you as my housekeeper. I want you as my wife if that's what you want too." The rain drummed on the roof as Eleanor considered his words. These past months had shown her who Lucas truly was, a man of honor and quiet strength, a man who respected her desire to learn, who treated her as an equal. Not the husband she'd expected when she signed that contract, but the one she'd choose freely now. "Yes," she said simply. "That's what I want too." The kiss that followed sealed a promise more binding than any contract. The next morning, the world seemed renewed. The rain had cleared the smoke from the air, and hints of green were already visible in the fields. Lucas and Eleanor rode into town together, their purpose clear. Reverend Thompson was surprised to see them. "Lucas, Miss Hayes, what brings you here on a Wednesday morning?" "We'd like to be married," Lucas said. "Today, if possible." The Reverend's bushy eyebrows rose nearly to his hairline. "I see. This is rather sudden, is it not?" "Not at all," Eleanor replied with a smile. "We've had 3 months to be sure." The ceremony was simple but meaningful. With only the Reverend's wife and the church sexton as witnesses, Lucas and Eleanor exchanged vows, promises not of submission and authority, but of partnership and respect. I, Lucas, take you, Eleanor, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to cherish and respect you, to support your dreams as you support mine, and to face whatever comes, fire, drought, or railroad men by your side, as long as we both shall live. Eleanor's eyes glistened with tears as she repeated similar vows, adding, I promise to continue learning not just reading and writing, but how to be the best partner for you and this land we both love. As they rode back to the ranch, their ranch now, Eleanor felt a sense of rightness settle over her. The mail-order bride arrangement that had brought her west had been founded on desperation and deception, but what had grown in its place was something true and strong. That evening, as Lucas carried her across the threshold of their home, Eleanor realized how far she'd come from that frightened, illiterate young woman who'd stepped off the stagecoach in April. She could now read simple books, write her name, and was learning to keep the ranch accounts. Most importantly, she'd found her voice and her courage. Later, as they lay together in what was now their shared bedroom, Lucas traced gentle fingers along her cheek. I never expected this, he confessed softly. When I sent for a bride, I thought I was just getting a housekeeper who could bear children, someone to make this place less lonely. And now, Eleanor asked, now I know I got so much more. His blue eyes were earnest in the lamplight. You're not just my wife, Eleanor. You're my partner, my friend, the heart of this place. Eleanor's throat tightened with emotion. I thought I was trading one form of servitude for another. I never imagined I'd find freedom here and love. Is that what this is? Lucas asked, a smile playing at his lips. Love. Yes, Eleanor answered simply. That's exactly what it is. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Eleanor's life. Each day brought new discoveries about ranching, about Lucas, about herself. She learned to ride properly, to help with the calves, to shoot a rifle. Lucas, in turn, proved an attentive husband, continuing her reading lessons and sharing the management of the ranch with growing trust in her judgment. Word spread through Oroville that Lucas Keller had finally married his mail-order bride. Some, like Mrs. Wilson, offered genuine congratulations. Others, like Victoria Cartwright, responded with thinly veiled disapproval. The banker's daughter has quite the sour face whenever she sees us, Eleanor remarked after an encounter at the general store. Lucas chuckled. Victoria always expected to get whatever she wanted. Her father made sure of that. Including you, Eleanor couldn't help asking. She thought so, Lucas admitted. Cartwright made it clear I'd be welcome in his family if I showed the proper interest in his daughter, but Victoria doesn't want a rancher, she wants the idea of one. Someone she can mold and control, who'll give her the rustic life she romanticizes without the actual work or hardship. Unlike me, Eleanor said with a smile. I seem to have acquired a taste for both the rancher and the hardship. Lucas's laughter was one of her favorite sounds, one she heard more frequently these days. September brought the cattle drive, when Lucas and two hired hands moved the herd to market in Sacramento. Eleanor insisted on accompanying them, despite Lucas's initial concerns. It's no place for a woman, he argued. Is it a place for your partner? Eleanor countered. Because that's what you said I was. In the end, Lucas relented, and Eleanor proved herself a capable member of the drive. She couldn't rope as well as the men, but she could keep the cattle moving, prepare meals, and even stand watch. At night, by the campfire, she continued reading from her poetry book, the men listening with unexpected interest to verses about nature and love. The cattle brought a good price, enough to see them through the winter comfortably and make some improvements to the ranch. As they rode back to Oroville, Eleanor felt a sense of accomplishment she'd never known in Boston. Here, her work mattered. She mattered, but trouble awaited them at home. They returned to find a corner of their fence cut and several cattle missing. Lucas's face darkened with anger as he surveyed the damage. "This wasn't random," he said grimly. "This was deliberate. The sheriff, when summoned, was sympathetic but unhelpful. No witnesses, no evidence." "Not much I can do, Keller. Cartwright's behind this," Lucas insisted. "Him or someone working for him." Sheriff Davis sighed. "That's a serious accusation against a prominent citizen. I need more than suspicion to act on." After he left, Eleanor found Lucas checking his rifle. "What are you planning?" she asked, alarmed. "Just making sure we can defend what's ours." His expression softened at her worried look. "I'm not going after anyone, Eleanor, but I won't let them take what we've built either." That night they took turns keeping watch. Nothing happened, but the sense of violation lingered. Someone wanted them gone badly enough to steal from them, to threaten their livelihood. The next day, Lucas rode to neighboring ranches, alerting them to watch for his missing cattle. Eleanor stayed behind, rifle within reach as she went about her chores. The paradise they'd been building felt suddenly vulnerable. When Lucas returned that evening, his expression was grim. "Davidson found 2 of our steers mixed in with his herd. Someone's scattering our cattle across the valley, hoping we won't find them all. Why not just steal them outright?" "Because this isn't just about the cattle," Lucas replied. "It's about wearing us down, making us feel like it's not worth fighting anymore." Eleanor's jaw set determinedly. "Then they don't know who they're dealing with." October brought an unexpected development. A letter arrived from the Southern Pacific Railroad, requesting a meeting with Lucas to discuss right-of-way acquisition through his property. The letter offered a sum for a strip of land that, while not insignificant, was far below market value. "They want to cut the ranch in half," Lucas explained as they studied a rough map. "The line would run right through our best grazing land and cut off access to the creek." "Can they force you to sell?" Eleanor asked, fear creeping into her voice. "They have ways," Lucas admitted. "The railroad has friends in government. They could try to claim eminent domain." "What will we do?" Lucas's expression was determined. "Fight them every step of the way. And in the meantime, make this place so profitable they can't afford what it's truly worth." Their opportunity came unexpectedly. While in town for supplies, Eleanor overheard a conversation between 2 miners about a new silver strike in the hills north of Oroville Hills that bordered Lucas's property. "Are you certain?" Lucas asked when she told him. "Silver, not gold." "That's what they said," Eleanor confirmed. "Apparently, it's a vein no one expected, running through the granite." Lucas was quiet for a long moment, thinking. "Those hills were considered worthless when I bought this land. That's why I got so many acres so cheaply." A slow smile spread across his face. "Eleanor, if there's silver on our property, then the railroad's offer is insultingly low," Eleanor finished, understanding dawning. They spent the next day exploring the northern boundary of their property, searching for any sign of silver ore. By late afternoon, exhausted and dusty, they were about to give up when Lucas's pick struck something that glinted in the sunlight. "Eleanor," he called, his voice tight with excitement. "Look at this." The vein was small but unmistakable silver ore, embedded in the rocky hillside. Not enough to make them mining magnates, perhaps, but more than enough to change the equation with the railroad. "What do we do now?" Eleanor asked as they rode home, a sample of ore wrapped carefully in Lucas's handkerchief. "We file a mineral claim," Lucas replied. "And then we wait for the railroad men to come calling." They didn't have to wait long. 3 days after filing their claim at the county office, a sleek carriage pulled up to the ranch house. 2 men descended, one a railroad official they'd never met, the other Cartwright himself. "Mr. Keller," the railroad man began smoothly. I'm Harrison Wells, acquisition agent for Southern Pacific. I believe you received our letter. I did, Lucas replied neutrally, inviting them into the house where Eleanor waited. This is my wife, Eleanor. She handles the ranch accounts with me. Wells barely acknowledged her with a nod. We've come to discuss our offer for the right-of-way through your property. The offer is insufficient, Lucas said bluntly, particularly given recent developments. Recent developments, Wells echoed, glancing at Cartwright. Our mineral claim, Eleanor interjected. Surely you're aware. The county office would have informed you. The brief flash of surprise on Wells's face confirmed they hadn't known. Cartwright's expression darkened. A mineral claim, Wells repeated. How fortuitous for you. Indeed, Lucas agreed. Silver changes everything, wouldn't you say? The negotiations that followed were tense. Wells, recovering quickly, attempted to dismiss the silver find as insignificant. Cartwright remained mostly silent, his eyes cold as he watched Lucas and Eleanor present a united front. Let me be clear, Lucas said finally. We're not opposed to selling a right-of-way. But it will be on our terms, at a fair price that reflects the true value of the land including its mineral rights. Wells looked like he'd swallowed something sour. I'll have to consult with my superiors. You do that, Lucas replied. In the meantime, we'd appreciate if the harassment of our property would cease. Cartwright straightened. I don't know what you're implying, Keller. I think you do, Lucas said quietly. Cut fences, scattered cattle, mysterious fires. It stops now, or the next conversation we have will be with the federal marshal, not the local sheriff. After they left, Eleanor turned to Lucas with wide eyes. Do you think it worked? We'll see, he replied. But we've shown them we're not easy targets. The next weeks brought a tense peace. No more cattle disappeared, no more fences were cut. The railroad sent a new offer, still not what they wanted, but significantly better than the first. They're taking us seriously now, Lucas observed as they reviewed the paperwork together. Eleanor, whose reading had improved dramatically, was able to spot several clauses that needed revision. We should counter, she suggested. Ask for more money and retain water rights to the creek. Lucas smiled at her. You've become quite the negotiator, Mrs. Keller. I learned from the best, she replied, leaning in to kiss him. A man who tore up an unfair contract once, remember? By December, they had reached an agreement with the railroad that satisfied both sides. The right-of-way would cut across the northern edge of their property, affecting the silver deposit, but leaving their best grazing lands intact. The compensation was substantial enough to expand the ranch, build a larger house, and ensure their future security. Cartwright, when they encountered him in town, could barely conceal his fury. You think you've won, he said in a low voice when Lucas was momentarily out of earshot. But this isn't over. Eleanor met his gaze steadily. Yes, Mr. Cartwright, it is. The railroad has what it wants. We have what we need, and you, well, you'll have to find someone else to bully. Winter settled over the ranch, bringing peaceful evenings by the fire. As Christmas approached, Eleanor found herself feeling unwell in the mornings. At first, she attributed it to the rich holiday foods Mrs. Wilson had shared, but when the pattern continued for 2 weeks, she recognized the signs. On Christmas Eve, as they sat together admiring the small pine tree they'd decorated with paper chains and dried berries, Eleanor placed Lucas's hand on her still flat stomach. "Merry Christmas," she whispered. "We're going to have a baby." Lucas's expression transformed from confusion to wonder. "A baby? You're certain?" Eleanor nodded, her eyes filling with tears of joy. "In summer, I think. July, perhaps." Lucas gathered her into his arms, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "A child," he murmured against her hair. "Our child." "The first of many, I hope," Eleanor said softly. As many as you wish, Lucas replied, his voice thick with emotion. This land deserves a family to love it for generations to come. The new year brought changes to the ranch. With the railroad money, Lucas hired more hands to help with the expanded herd and began construction on a larger house, one with a proper kitchen, several bedrooms, and most exciting to Eleanor, a small library. For all your books, Lucas explained as they reviewed the plans. And for teaching our children to read. Children, Eleanor echoed, smiling as she rested a hand on her growing belly. I like the sound of that. As Eleanor's pregnancy progressed, she remained active in ranch operations, though Lucas insisted she limit her riding and heavy work. Instead, she focused on the household accounts and planning for their future. Her reading and writing had improved to the point where she could correspond with suppliers and keep detailed records of their livestock and expenses. You've come so far, Lucas remarked one evening as she finished a letter to a cattle buyer in Sacramento. Remember when you couldn't read your own contract? Eleanor smiled, thinking of that frightened young woman who'd arrived in Oroville a year ago. I remember being terrified you'd send me back east when you discovered my secret. Never, Lucas said, taking her hand. Even then, I knew there was something special about you, something that had nothing to do with reading or writing. And now? Eleanor asked, her free hand resting on her rounded belly. Now I know I'm the luckiest man in California, Lucas replied. I sent for a bride and found the other half of my soul. Spring brought renewal to the land and progress to their plans. The new house was nearly complete, the cattle were thriving, and Eleanor's belly grew rounder with each passing week. They had decided to move into the new home before the baby arrived, giving themselves time to settle in before the demands of parenthood began. May arrived with wildflowers carpeting the hills and the promise of summer in the air. Eleanor, now heavily pregnant, supervised the move to their new home while Lucas managed the spring calving. The new house was everything they'd dreamed, spacious yet comfortable, with large windows that caught the morning light and a wide porch where they could watch the sunset. Eleanor took particular pride in the library, with its built-in shelves waiting to be filled with books. It's perfect, she told Lucas as they stood in the empty room. Our children will grow up loving books from the start. Just like their mother, Lucas said fondly, his hand resting protectively on her back. June brought scorching heat and the final preparations for the baby. Eleanor sewed tiny garments and prepared a nursery in the room adjacent to theirs. Lucas crafted a cradle from oak, his hands gentle on the wood as he imagined the child who would sleep within it. As Eleanor's time grew near, Lucas arranged for Mrs. Wilson to stay with them. I don't want to take any chances, he insisted when Eleanor protested she didn't need help. The nearest doctor is an hour's ride away. In the end, Eleanor was grateful for the older woman's presence. Her labor began in the early hours of July 2nd, hard and fast, nothing like the gradual process Mrs. Wilson had described. This baby's in a hurry, Mrs. Wilson commented as she helped Eleanor pace the bedroom. Lucas, pale with worry, hovered nearby. Should I ride for the doctor? No time, Mrs. Wilson replied calmly. This child's coming now. Eleanor's son entered the world with a lusty cry just as dawn broke over the eastern hills. Small but perfect, with Lucas's blue eyes and a shock of dark hair that reminded Eleanor of her father. William, she whispered as Lucas placed the swaddled infant in her arms. William Lucas Keller. Lucas's eyes filled with tears as he gazed at his wife and son. My father's name was William. I know, Eleanor replied softly. You told me once. I've been saving it for today. As morning light filled the room, casting a golden glow over the new family, Eleanor felt a sense of completion. From a desperate young woman signing a contract she couldn't read, She had become a wife, a rancher, and now a mother. All because one man had looked at an unfair contract and said, "This ends now." "What are you thinking?" Lucas asked, noticing her pensive expression. "I'm thinking about beginnings and endings," Eleanor replied, stroking her son's soft cheek. "How sometimes what seems like the end of hope can become the beginning of everything good." Lucas leaned down to kiss her, then the baby. "This is just the beginning," he promised, "for all of us." The years that followed proved him right. William grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his father's quiet strength and his mother's determination. 2 years later, he was joined by a sister, Emma Rose, who inherited her father's sandy hair and her mother's quick mind. The ranch prospered as the railroad brought new markets within reach. Lucas and Eleanor expanded their operations, adding orchards and experimenting with new breeds of cattle. The silver mine, while never producing spectacular wealth, provided a steady income that allowed them to educate their children and contribute to the growing community of Oroville. Eleanor's greatest pride, besides her family, was the small school she established on their property initially for their own children, then for the children of their ranch hands and neighbors. She taught reading and writing herself, remembering always what it meant to be locked out of the world of words. "You're changing lives," Lucas told her one evening as they watched her students' 8 children of various ages riding home after their lessons. "As you changed mine," Eleanor replied, leaning against his shoulder, "by giving me a chance to choose my own path." On their 10th wedding anniversary, Lucas presented Eleanor with a special gift, a small, leather-bound book. Inside, she found the story of their beginning, written in Lucas's neat hand. "I wanted our children to know," he explained as she turned the pages with trembling fingers, "how their mother came west with nothing but courage, and how she built everything we have together." "We built it together," Eleanor corrected gently. "Yes," Lucas agreed, pulling her close. "The contract brought you here, but love kept you, and I thank God every day for both." As twilight settled over the land they'd fought for and loved together, Eleanor Keller looked out from the porch of the home they'd built. In the distance, William and Emma raced their ponies across the pasture. Nearby, Lucas checked the garden fence, his movements still strong and purposeful after all these years. This was the life she'd never dared to dream of, not just security and comfort, but true partnership, respect, and deep, abiding love. All because a desperate young woman had signed a contract she couldn't read, and a principled man had torn it up and offered something better in its place. "No regrets?" Lucas asked, coming to stand beside her. Eleanor smiled up at him, her heart as full as it had been on that rainy day when they'd first declared their love. "Not one," she replied, taking his hand. "Every word of our story has been worth it." And it was a story that would continue, through their children and their children's children, on the land they'd fought for, and the love they'd built word by precious word.